You see, that's the screen I mentioned.
Oh yeah.
I like that so much.
Just trying to tell.
Today is what day? What day is today? 19th?
20th, I think. I posted my draft with the 20th, so maybe it's a draft from. Okay, I posted draft from the future.
So that's 19th.
It's 19th.
Oh.
Oh, I must have looked at it.
Yeah.
When it was already past midnight.
No, the US time should be behind.
No, but I'm not sure how I arrived at the 20th. I bet, but the system did accept the posting of the draft from the 20th.
Oh. Guess we are there. 1 minute.
Let's see if I saw this.
The number 67. Yeah, we hopefully. Yeah.
All right, great. Have a good session.
Thank you.
Well, actually,
No, there should be something plugged into my computer. Yeah, that works. Okay. I don't know. No, this time works. No. Anyway,
I have this one here.
this time work either. I don't know. It's time for us to start the session. This is the anima session in IETF 99. So if you happen to be in the wrong session, wrong room, you still have time to leave. If you are here in the right working group, please make sure you sign the blue sheets before you leave. This is a note wheel for IETF, and everybody should read that. If you don't, please make sure you read that afterwards. Before we begin the meetings, we already sent out the blue sheets, and we need a job describer. Anybody volunteer for that job? Terry, could you do that? Terry, could you do the job? All right. Okay. Who could be volunteer for minutes taker? Bing? Yeah, Terry will watch you when you make the presentation. Thank you. We have the remote participation. Therefore, on the remote side, Brian will make his presentation from the remote, another side of the Earth, New Zealand. And all those slides have been uploaded. One of you just did it now. And the mailing list, we have the ANIMA mailing list going on with a lot of discussions. And this session is chaired by me, Xinjiang, and Terence Aker. This is the minute agenda. We have very full agenda today. But given the status that most of those working group documents are already in the final stage of the working group, so hopefully we maybe save some time from the update. We have all 7 milestones working group documents being giving updates today. Grasp of 10 minutes, voucher by Kant will be 10 minutes, and the birth key by Michael for 10 minutes, and the SAP control plan will be updated by Terence, and I'll do the prefix management, stable connectivity by Terence, and the reference model with a little bit more time by Jefferson. And we are going to talk a little bit regarding to the objective for the NI. Brian will do it remotely, and I actually assigned 35 minutes to myself for the animal rechartering considerations. And after that, we have 3 topics which never be discussed in the working group yet. So that's new work proposed, ANIMA bootstrapping for network management, and apply ANI in ION network management. Also toward public PubSub and storage integrating in ANIMA by author. Any agenda bash? Once? Twice? Go. Okay, I will give you the brief update for the milestone status. Up to now, we have 7 milestone, 7 working group documents. The GRASP, which has passed the ISG evaluation early this month, so that's going to be, it's all clear. It's going to be published in 1 or 2 months' time. Voucher, it passed the working group last last month. It's in the Shepherd writing up. I'm the Shepherd. We are waiting for the IPR disclosure confirmation from causers. So I believe Kent and Richardson, you don't have.
I don't think they're going to do their own working group last fall unless you ask them.
I mean the IPR.
I have not.
All right, but I missed you. Okay, and we are also giving a little bit more time for the working group last call. Yeah.
The first one, I think you mean GRASP.
Yeah, that's the old name of GRASP. Sorry about it. Yes, my mistake.
To be clear to us for the room, there are people who are not long-term IETF participants,
yeah,
and you are confusing them.
Yeah, that's GRASP. Sorry. Yeah, my mistake. So we plan to send the voucher document to ISG by the probably next week, and the 2 validation use case, which was mature for a while, but waiting for the GRASP to get clear. So the prefix management passed the working group last call this month. It's in Shepherd writing up, and the stable connectivity draft is currently in working group last call. It will be end next week, I think. Yeah, next Friday. And we still have 3 documents in the working group stage. The bootstrap key infrastructure, planning to have the working group last call next month. Anima reference model, which maybe have working group last call in September or October. That, in my plan, will be the last one for the current charter. And we also have the autonomic control plan, planning to have working group last call next month as well. Yeah. Okay. Then we turn that to Brian for the update of GRASP. Brian, are you there? Hello. Yeah, he's coming. So I need to go red button for him. Okay. You're on,
Okay,
Brian.
is that working? You can hear me? Okay, is that working? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear my
Okay.
own echo, so
Go
excuse
ahead.
me if I stutter. Okay, go straight to the next slide, please. And you can read that, so you can go straight to the next slide. So as Shane said, the remaining discussed ballots have been cleared for version 15. I apologize that version 15 was only posted this week, but the deadline caught us. We already have our assigned port 7017. I think that the multicast addresses will be assigned right away as soon as the ISG approval notice goes out, which I guess needs someone to press a button. And just the other comment is that there are 2 normative dependencies on drafts in the document, which will have to be cleared before the RFC can actually come out. One of them is the CDDL language, which is proposed this meeting to be adopted by the CBOR working group. And we have a contingency plan in case that document doesn't get approved in time. And the other dependency is on the ACP, which is on the agenda a little bit later. So next slide, please. This covers in one slide all the changes since the previous IETF. From a practical point of view, the most important thing was the first one, which is the testing that Bill Atwood was doing remotely at home. Told me that there was some issues in the details of the discovery timeouts that needed to be better specified. So that was the important change from a practical point of view. Then we basically rewrote a lot of the security text and the text about transport layers. Many thanks to Turles, who did actually most of the work on that. And the intention there was to respond to the comments of the ISG, but not to change anything in the underlying intent. It's just that we haven't made the intent completely clear. The only issue there was that we made a very clear statement that unicast UDP is not defined as a solution in this version of GRASP. I fully expect that people will profile GRASP to run over UDP, but that needs more work. A very small protocol change was that the ART people asked us to add a protocol and port number when specifying a URI as a locator, and the rest was basically editorial. So next slide, please. I also want to point out there are 3 related drafts, the API draft and the draft on guidelines for writing ASAs. There are issues, I think, for the re-charter, but we really need people to read them and comment them, because I think they will be very helpful to implementers, even if they don't become standard track documents. And the third related draft is on the agenda later, so I won't spend any more time on it. So next slide. There's one prototype which I moved recently to GitHub, but the real next step is we need production quality code and we need interop testing. I'm sure that when we do that, we'll find some errors and some extensions that we need in Grasp, but we can't do that until people start using it. So really, that's my most important point, that we need people to write code and come to a hackathon in future to test it. And next slide, I think, is where I ask if there's any discussion.
Hi, Brian. It's Michael Richardson. About your ANI objectives document, my understanding is that the purpose of this document is to kind of collect some of the objectives and some of the things into a single place so that people can kind of compare and contrast them and see about the consistency of them. Some other people have been treating it as canonical versions of what the documents actually should have, and I thought of it as the other way around, is that the documents have stuff in them and this simply collects them.
Can we have that discussion during the slot for the ANI objectives?
Sure, didn't know there was one.
There is.
Great.
Terry, responsible AD, I've just pressed the button to approve Grasp. An announcement will come out very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're done for Grasp. Thank you, Brent. So move to next. Let's see, Butcher. Okay.
Good morning, working group. Glad to see my co-author Max is online. Keep me honest. So this is the update to the voucher draft. Next slide, please. So as a recap, at IETF 98, we presented the voucher document as having just a few open issues remaining, with an expectation to be ready for last call within a few weeks. Of course, that dragged on, and here we are now, but we are, as was just mentioned, post last call, so hopefully this will go through very quickly now. Since then, the bootstrapping design team has been meeting weekly. About 50% of the time has been on Brisky and 50% of the time on voucher. Next slide, please. Updates. I know no one likes this, but honestly, this is the meat of the presentation, so let me just go through it. So the main thing is that this version introduces use of the voucher structure for signing requests. So the voucher structure itself can be used by a pledge to the registrar, and then the registrar can embed the pledge's quote request and send it on to the MASA so then the MASA can get a full history of the signing request. And this is actually an interesting way of doing it. If you think about it, how X509 works with the CSRs. I mean, the CSR is technically a different structure than X509, and this is actually nice because it's actually the same structure. Okay, so also this version opens the possibility that alternative voucher artifact signing structures may be signaled by external mechanisms. So currently the document says it's PKCS7 or CMS, but in the future, it may be desired for it to be JWS or CDWS. And so the document language was reworded so as it wasn't, exclusively saying it had to be PKCS7. Next, no, sorry, I meant number 3. Number 3 introduces this version introduces a flag for the voucher to signal the pledge that it must fail close. So when the voucher itself may have stapled to it, and I think actually it might be number 6 here, stapled to it all the intermediate certificates that it was signed by, and also number 7, it has also potentially the revocation objects stapled to it, or alternatively, the pledge could dynamically fetch the revocation objects. But the question here is for whether or not, what does the pledge do if in the case that it's not able to get the revocation objects? Does it fail open, fail close? And so here we have introduced a flag to state definitively that it must or not fail open or close. 4, we added the proximity assertion type. So previously it was always verified or logged, and now we have proximity. So proximity was added specifically to support the notion of the voucher requests. So when the pledge is sending its request to the registrar, it would indicate that the assertion type is proximity. And likewise, when the registrar is sending its request to the massa, the assertion type is proximity. We did also remove the domain certificate identifier because now the PEN domain certificate is used exclusively, meaning that we no longer have this potential like an algorithm for having to discover which of the sub certificates or CAs are being used that can be verified. Sorry, that's not very easy to express. All right, so I already talked about 6 and 7, so we can go to the next slide already. There's only one open issue, and I mean, I know we're post last call, but this is on GitHub, so, and maybe Max, who's online, can speak to this as well. But the GitHub issue is whether or not we should have mandatory or optional fields. So currently the voucher structure, it's being defined using Yang, and in Yang there's certain leafs that are mandatory true. So the values always, they must be specified all the time. But when the voucher structure is being used for request, those fields don't make much sense. Like you wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't propagate them necessarily from pledge to registrar. So what do? So we have a few options. One is to fill in dummy values for the mandatory fields. Another is to change the Yang to say that the fields are not mandatory. And a third would be to define a separate request structure. And I see we have a co-author at the mic. Go ahead.
I'll let you finish your sentence.
Well, that was it. Any thoughts?
Well, I have a thought on this topic, but I can't actually change the microphone on a different topic. So my question is it possible for us to write a Yang extension that then marks them as optional, like an enclosing or a, what was the thing we changed it? We changed the Yang so that we could include it as an include and augment and stuff like that, right? A grouping. We added the grouping so we could do that. We can't override the grouping in another Yang model, right?
No.
We can't do that. So we have to set them the right way. Whereas we couldn't make them could we make them mandatory in an outer grouping? No, we can't change the value at all.
I think you could. If an external was using the grouping, they could set them mandatory true. But if they're already mandatory true, then you could not set them mandatory false.
So then maybe we need to set the mandatory false in the voucher document so that we can set them true where we need them true and false where we need them false.
Right. So that's kind of like option number 2 here.
Yeah.
So changing the Yangs so that they're not mandatory.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's what we have to do, which is unfortunate because I think it means that we can't use as much of the Yang structure to say whether or not it's valid or not, right? Mm-hmm. Because we want to reuse the object twice and it has different rules in each place.
Right. I mean, it's not my preference, personally.
Okay.
I think it's not semantically meaningful, but if that's the working group's opinion,
I hate to fill in dummy values if they're empty. I really hate that option, right? So, I mean, nil maybe, but the column's still there. I hate to do that. Sorry, Tori, let's go ahead and I'll go to another option.
Yeah. Also, just as a co-author, so I after the last update, I think I feel that we can be on top of these derived specifications, and maybe we just define the voucher request in Brewski, because so far we don't know anything else but Brewski that needs it, and that's where we basically remove these fields and keep them mandatory in the voucher. And the fact that the voucher is kind of, suggestive as to how it could be used for requests is fine, right? It's not fully specified there, and we kind of finish that specification in Brewski because that's the only place it seems we need it, while we think that reusing the voucher itself across, multiple protocols. So, whatever gets it out fastest. And I think I like the idea to be, use as much of the Yang structure to indicate what needs to be in something. And, if we make everything, optional, then it's, by far not, semantically as strong.
Thank you. And this is actually my preference as well, to keep the voucher Yang as semantically meaningful as possible. Sorry, Michael, do you have another comment?
It's not on this topic.
Okay. All right. So I think this is my last slide. So are there any more comments on this before I sit down? All right. Okay, great. Thank you.
So what I on the greater issue, which is I wanted to ask for AD, we did do a working group last call. We failed to tell our two other groups about it. We do have some more issues and like this, so that I'm not sure that are completely nailed. Are we okay, or should we be redoing our working group last call across all three groups?
Cross-group involvement is pretty important, I would think. To do another working group last call, I think, is sensible, and it happens quite often actually in the IETF where working groups do multiple last calls. It gives the opportunity for those other areas, those other working groups, to be made well aware that you're doing it again because you found significant issues, and you really, really, really want the feedback from those groups. So please do another one.
Okay, so is that clear? I think we should just repeat do it across the thing and do it once we've come to a clear conclusion on this topic, because I think it's pretty important.
Yeah, Terry, that should, way to working class call crossover to the 6-ish and netconf, or we should ask the 6-ish working group chairs or netconf.
The working group last call happens here.
Okay.
But you as chairs should reach out to netconf and 6-ish and explicitly bring it to their attention.
Okay, we'll do that. Sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so next is Brewski. Michael, your turn.
Next slide, please. Oh, the front monitor works, first time. In April, Max did a whole lot of heavy lifting and essentially took 80% of the document and threw it into an appendix. And then we garbage collected, right? We pulled back all the pieces that we clearly needed and moved things around into a different order. And you can see the difference in the URL if you want to go to the diff. It's pretty good. The document is, I think, about 10 pages shorter. So don't count Appendix D, which we intend to remove, but don't assume that the text in Appendix D is gone and we don't want to say those things, but rather, if you feel that things are said in Appendix D better than they are in the rest of the document or need to be said in the document, then please say, I still like this text, and please stuff it in between sections 4.2.1 and 4.2.9 or something like that, or create a new section. That's what we'd really like to hear. And there's still stuff in there that we're I would say we have some, we don't know exactly where to put yet. Some of those documents they need to percolate in your head a little bit more. Next slide, please. So a little bit more, kind of detail what we did. Previously, we explained, we had these sections called behavior of a pledge, behavior of a this, behavior of that. So we were trying to describe how each of the actors would act based upon inputs and outputs. And that's usually a good way to describe things, because you want to describe each one of them as if they really don't know what the others are doing, and you want to describe a kind of state machine for them. And so we did that, and then we had protocol 7 details, and we had things like this. And the text was getting a little bit unwieldy, and we were actually starting to say things in the sections. About one section we'd say behavior of the registrar, and then we'd say something about the pledge, and it went back and forth. And so we had actually already violated that kind of principle of, you only know what you're doing and you just react to what other people inputs there. So that's why we said, okay, look, we obviously we want to write the document the other way around. The other way around is to say the time sequence of first you go to the store and then you buy your groceries and then you walk home and then you do this stuff, as opposed to the store experiences a customer coming in and leaving, right? So that's why we rewrote it. They're two different styles. You'll see them both in the IETF. So that's the new protocol, section 3, and it's organized by the time sequence of the steps that need to occur. And that seemed to explain to many people much better as to what the flow of the whole process is. It's probably worse off from the point of view of somebody who has been assigned the job of writing the registrar without knowing anything about any other pieces, right? So that's a worse experience for them. They have to learn what everyone else is doing in order to figure out what they're doing. On the other hand, it's much more clear that the protocol sticks together, and that if the customer wants to go to the store is willing to accept the customer. That's the kind of process. So as I said, shrunk from 54 pages to 42 pages. Most people think shorter documents are better. As I said, I actually, on the left-hand side, I actually had to cut out quite a few lines of the table of contents to make it fit on the slide. So that itself should tell you something. Next slide, please. Technical changes to the document. Well, a lot of it was to align with the voucher. So we went back and forth between the voucher document and the Brewski document to make it all work. So essentially, prior to this point, you would send some, if you're the registrar, the pledge, you would say, hey, I'm a pledge, and here's some JSON with my serial number. And if you're the registrar, you then say, oh, thank you very much. I'll talk to the MASA, and I'll ask the MASA, hey, I have this serial number, I'm this guy, and what's going on. And then you get a voucher response. And so we realized this was a kind of little bit disorganized and ad hoc. So instead, what we're doing is the pledge actually says, here's a voucher, which I could optionally sign with my key if I have lots of CPU around. And it contains, yes, my serial number and maybe a couple of other things that matter. And the registrar says, oh, thank you very much. And actually can turn around and say to the MASA, here is I'm going to sign this voucher like object. And this is kind of what I want. Would you sign this thing that says, the following things? And it's in exactly the format that you want them to say. Okay. So I have two purple boxes there. One has one is the, ooh, I screwed up. I should have said no, that's right. The registrar may send a new voucher, could be signed by the pledge, have inside of that voucher request is a voucher that was signed by the pledge. So there's a kind of recursive thing. So you can always put another voucher inside of your voucher when you're doing a voucher request that says, you know what, I got this thing previously, or I received this thing from the pledge. And from the syntax and the Yang, we can go as deep as you like, and there may be some logic to do that, although semantically, I don't think we have syntactically that's allowed. Semantically, it's not clear that it makes sense to have more than two embedded objects there. But essentially it says, basically what you're doing is you're walking into the passport office, you say, here's my birth certificate, here's my stuff, and here's my previous passport, in case that makes it faster for you to look up my details and issue me a new one. Okay. So in the second case, the voucher renewal, that's exactly what we're doing, because what we've said now is that we no longer expect to have long-lived vouchers. Instead, we expect to have rather short vouchers that you can renew in a non-contiguous fashion. So if for some reason you got a voucher for a device and you didn't use it immediately and it expired because it was only good for 20 minutes, let's say, you could come back 3 days later and say, here's the voucher you gave me 3 days ago. I'd like you to renew the same thing. And the mass is going to say, yeah, you know what, that's pretty good. I don't see anything's changed in the world. So here's a re-signed thing. It's also good for 20 minutes. Go for it. And that's it. Oh, and I validated, when it does this, of course, it validates all, make sure there's no revocations or anything else that's happened. And so that's why the period of the voucher is relatively short, because that gets around of us ever having to revoke them. They expire on their own. And on the right-hand side, in the voucher signed by MASA, you see a little purple box, and that's the registrar's public ID. So I tried to keep the colors consistent there. So that essentially means that the voucher now has pinned the identity of the registrar, and has done this pretty typically by the last certificate, or I would like to say even self-signed certificate of the registrar. So that means the pledge doesn't have to have a big long chain of certificates or anything else to it to validate things. It's pretty much set. Next. Previously, I think we were vague about what the identity the registrar expressed to the MASA. I believed, and implemented in code, that it was the contents of the TLS client certificate, which is sometimes hard to get from an application framework, but it's not impossible. And that was the identity of the registrar. That's doable, but we realize that's not so easy. So this business now of having the registrar actually sign the voucher request now says, and the registrar is saying, this is the identity I want you to issue to, because this is the signature on it. So that's much simpler. It doesn't depend upon TLS client certificates. In particular, it also means that the entity doing the entity in the registrar that reaches out to the MASA no longer has to have access to the registrar's private key to make the TLS request. It could potentially do just like web stuff and not have a TLS client request, client certificate, or it could use a completely different thing. The MASA doesn't care. Okay. So next slide. So we did settle after a long discussion through mostly the winter before the last IETF. And at the last IETF, I guess we were really still sitting on the fence as to whether or not we were going to jump from PKCS 7 signed JSON to a JWT. Okay. And I would say that we decided not to step forward on that at this time. So we can do it. We could move to a Jose signed JSON, which is almost but not quite JWT, or we can move all the way to JWT, and we can move to CWT COT, JOT and COT. I find if I pronounce them JOT and COT, for people that have never heard of them, they're like, what? What are you talking about? You just need to be a little Welsh to understand W's are vowels. Go talk to those guys. I think it's hilarious. But so the registrar needs to be aware of all the formats that we're going to create. Okay, if the registrar wants to audit in the process we've created, it has the registrar signing these objects. The registrar needs to know what they are. So if we have 6 different formats, registrars are going to have to support 6 different formats. MASAs and pledges, however, which are created by the same vendor, manufacturer, support 1. Okay, so if you are dealing with a constrained or a small device, you don't have to support 6 different voucher formats. You pick one. Okay, And that's it. And as the massa, as the manufacturer, you decide my pledges will have JWTs, if that's what we move to, and the massa says I support JWTs, and that's a manufacturing time decision that you make, and you hope the registrars support them before you deploy, I guess. So the registrar is the guy that's in the hot seat, and the rest of them are driving or can, you know, have to wait for the registrar support. But again, it's not a negotiation. There's no back and forth. We don't say, oh, I have to convert this and that. Pledge supports what the pledge supports, and he expresses that when he does that. Next slide, please. I put a questions, comments here, and I have a couple of another slide after that because I thought it'd be good to stop here. Are the design team summary emails that I have been posting every 5 or 6 weeks useful? Because they take a good 3 hours to write. Pardon? They're not useful for you? Right. Does anyone read the design team summaries that I post? Yeah.
As AD, they're useful to me.
Okay.
I enjoy reading them, and it's useful for giving a sense of how the document evolved. So
Sure.
I think I personally think it's good. So
They're essentially condensed from our Etherpad, which is usually several thousand lines long.
Right.
And, you know, we actually keep the Etherpad in our Git tree as well.
Yeah.
As a dated thing, mostly because I'm scared we'll, you know, lose a good idea.
So I'm not going to go and read the Git repository.
Yeah.
But I will read the mailing list.
Okay.
And for me, it's good. So thank you from me.
All right.
The rest of the working groups mileage may vary.
Hi, Dan Bogdanovic. For me, it's very useful because it gives me a summary. I can't participate in the day-to-day, but then catching up and see when what happened in the, past weeks. It's a, it's a useful summary to catch up.
Okay. So good.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Yeah. It was me to ask you to do the summary in the mailing list for every time after you have the, design team meetings.
We don't usually come to conclusions at the end of every hour-long call.
Yeah.
This is why you see them every 5 or 6 weeks, because usually I would have to edit it 6 or 7 times, the same text. But yeah.
Sure. That's really grateful. But if you think that is time consuming, what you could do is you can, close the design team mailing list, then move all those.
We have done that. We've stopped using our design team mailing list. Okay. Yeah. So you'll see it all on the main list. Yes. But the contents of our meetings, the notes we keep from our meetings, we actually wind up basically arguing text in the Etherpad, and then we wind up, summarize summarize the reason for the argument.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm happy to keep doing it, and it's on my to-do list, but I haven't done it.
I think the summary is quite useful.
Okay.
Even for you guys self.
It's good for us. Next slide, please. What was the last one? Oh, yes.
Maybe just one thing note from my side also. No, I've started a Shepherd review on the document. We haven't been able to put that all back into the latest version posted, but for example, the ANI objective text, there was also proposed text in those changes, right? So there's this outstanding request from that Shepherd review.
Right. So I mentioned something about Appendix D. I really do need people to read the document who haven't read the document, and then say, did I understand everything? And then if the conclusion is, there was pieces I didn't understand, please go read Appendix D and see if there was some text there that helped you. Because as I said, we ripped a good lot out, and Torless has more proposed text that we haven't figured out how to fit in. I was in the process of filling out the MIME registry templates when I realized that we kind of have a bit of a mess in our MIME types, and I don't really know what the right answer is. I don't know if there are any MIME experts in the room now. If not, I'm going to have to go find. I sent a couple emails to a few of the MIME type people as to what we're supposed to do. We had a plus CMS, and it turns out the plus something is actually a protected subtype, or not protected, a registered subtype in the thing, and so we can't just willy-nilly create them. So one of the questions is, should we have one MIME type for the vouchers, and then, you know, some other argument that says whether it's a request or response or something, or should we have different MIME types or things like that? That was one of the issues that came up. Elliot.
Hi, Elliot Lear. First, I did a MIME type for the mud stuff, so if you catch me offline, I'll share my experiences with you on that. I think what it boils down to, Michael, is if this is meant to be an interplay specifically for this particular application, then you can use the same MIME type or subtype, complete with plus, by the way, because that's what I did with mud. So I can work with you offline on that, and we can propose something back to the working group.
Okay. Well, I read the guidelines, and it suggested that I shouldn't say plus anything unless there's actually a MIME subtype registry for the plus stuff.
Right. You get something registered for it.
You can add to it. Yeah. Just it wasn't clear to me that we had a unique need that wasn't there already. So
okay, I mean, yeah, if you're comfortable with using one of the existing types, but I was counseled, and I can go into this offline, to go ahead and create one of those nice little plussy like things for mud, and if you want to do the same, we can have the same conversation with the same people to see if we get the same results.
Okay, that actually would work the best. So we do meet at this point. We have been meeting weekly at 1400. We tend to use either Appear-In or WebEx. Tuesdays at 1400. If you're going to join us, let us know so we know what to expect you. And it's usually a audio, mostly with some screen sharing, with a lot of Etherpad for stuff. I would expect that we'd be ready for working group last call by around September 1st. Nothing ever gets done in August. At least you never get any reviews. But we're still working on it. So that's why I wouldn't want to start a working group last call August 15th or something, because no one would notice. But I would expect that we'd be finished by the next IETF and be in the queue. Anyone planning to implement any of the pieces? Registrar, Massa, Pledge? Any good Facebook postings out there? Yeah, okay, 2 hands up there. That's great to know. Okay, other than us. All right, thanks.
So one minor question. You also think this document should be cross-posted for the working group last call, yeah?
Do I think it should be? I don't think it needs to be in the same way that the voucher does.
Okay.
Okay, I think this is really our protocol.
All right.
NetConf is not using Brewski. 6tish is not using Brewski as written.
Okay.
Okay.
So just our working group.
Yeah, I think that's enough to do us. Yeah,
Sure.
Unless there's some reason to do elsewhere, I don't think there's anything else we need.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Good day. Thanks. So next will be. Could you be a little bit quicker? Because go ahead.
Okay, next slide. All right, so after Chicago, the last version I posted was 07. So let me quickly summarize the changes from 07. We have this connection to legacy equipment in the NOC that cannot speak the ACP natively. That section I overhauled and made it a lot more explicit after a bunch of questions came in how that works. So please read that. So you've got your ACP interface without encryption into this device, and then you have your old data plane. Don't want to go into too much detail for time reasons. Next slide. So then basically what came out of Chicago was the discussion about this negotiation of the secure channel in an extensible fashion. And the thing that we never completely worked out was kind of how would we negotiate that, for example, with GRASP. And there was also the point being brought up that IETF is actually meant to negotiate arbitrary protocols. So in conclusion of that, I basically moved that whole section out of the normative part of the document into an informative, kind of possible next steps. Wrote in, that IETF should do it, but also wrote that it's not clear whether IETF would successfully get amended to negotiate something like 801AE or other hardware encryption schemes that people wanting to implement ACP in layer 2 environments might want to use. So from that perspective, I think this is a section documenting that more work needs to be done, and certainly would be very interesting to come up with a GRASP negotiation that would reflect what IETF is doing and maybe expand it, like, negotiate on the objective of which encryption gives the best performance. Next slide. So there is a lot more terminology in there, right? So now the field in the certificate that has the ACP information, there is the term ACP information on that, and that's also the field that we're using to authenticate a neighbor certificate in before the OU was used. But then there was all this text in the document that was saying, oh, we would like to be able to also authenticate certificates from other domains. So you never know what's in the certificate. We want the certificate to be reusable, so we want to make sure that whatever we do for the ACP does not depend on anything that some other use of the ACP, some other existing functionality in the devices would, have in a way that's incompatible. So the only dependency against certificates other that, they need to be valid and, you check the authentication is anything checking against the ACP information. And it's also made extensible. I have a slide for that. Next slide. Okay, so then basically the ANI objective for the ACP, that text is in there right now. I've expanded a little bit because I always found it confusing that the objective itself doesn't carry the locator where you actually find the objective. That's in another part of the message. So in the text now there's the complete message, the flood message through which you basically find on a link ACP neighbors. And the main part was also that we're going to have a parameter in there that lists the type of security channel protocol supported. In this case, IETF, could be DTLS as well. Those are the two options. And that basically also means that because we learned this right now, I adopted the text, how the secure channel negotiation works. You find the neighbor, you know which protocol it supports. Those are the ones you're trying. Next slide. The protocols that basically at the GRASP level are negotiated are reduced to IETF and DTLS. So IETF itself is going to negotiate between native IPsec and IPsec over GRE. And those are the ones mandated to be required by standard autonomic devices, and DTLS is kind of the test balloon, and we'll see if we have any more problems in getting that through security review in terms of complete specification and other aspects. But certainly it would be good to have at least one test balloon to see how extensibility works both for us and for the IETF. There's no need for port assignment, right? GRASP negotiates the port as well. Next slide. Okay, so then basically in the last 2 weeks, I heavily worked on the ACP, posted 08 today. And so the idea was that the text should now be code complete in terms of all the pieces that people asked, how does this and that work, should be in there right now. There was a bunch of things missing. So hopefully we'll get a Shepherd review working group last call fairly soon on that. There is now a terminology section with all these terms. There is the references are now separated, normative, informative. Try to resolve all the endnotes and other open items, and then marked all the major sections as either normative or informative, and moved sections initially from the normative section out to the informative when they were really all this type of background and cool to do things and stuff that's actually just explaining things from other documents. So that hopefully makes reading the normative text a lot better. And then basically fixed a limited number of functional aspects that were wrong. And I think the best way to go through it, next slide, is to look at the table of contents. So the first thing that was missing was the whole section on, okay, we've got certificates, how do we maintain them in terms of certificate renewal? That section was added. Then the whole section about neighbor discovery that was stripped down. There is now only what we really want to use, which is dull grasp. All the other stuff that we discussed is now in the informative section. Then security association, as we said, IQ2 DTLS. Then how to use grasp in the ACP. So I basically wrote that into two main subsections. The one explaining why we really consider grasp in the ACP as a core part of the ACP. And that's really because the core services for connectivity are unicast and service discovery. Grasp does more, but those are the two key pieces, I think, that really are at the lowest level of autonomic connectivity, right? So you can't get away with just unicast. You need service discovery. That's basically one part of that Grasp does. And then the second part is the reversal, and that's what we kind of worked out through the review of Grasp in IESG, and that's basically that we're saying Grasp always needs something like a security and transport substrate, some underlying function that defines how Grasp messages are sent and secured. And you can reuse it if you define such a substrate. So in this case, Grasp across the ACP uses ACP as that security transport substrate, and that's what basically in these words is explained there. Then basically we've got the addressing scheme. So I renamed the addressing scheme that we have so far as the zone addressing scheme and added what I've called the V8 addressing scheme. That's basically what Michael was suggesting with 256, so 8-bit of virtual addresses, not doing the zone and a comparison between these two. I reworked on Monday with Pascal the Ripple profile to meet that profile template from Michael with a lot more detail, and also defining the pro and cons. I have a slide for that. And then on the way on the button here, somehow the PDF conversion killed that. There is now in these general consideration, there is a subsection about ACP interfaces, and that came back to the discussion that Brian always was asking. Okay, so now we've got these link local messages in the ACP. So where are they sent? And they're sent into interfaces. Interfaces are mapped to secure channels. You can map them one by one as point-to-point, or you can map them multiple secure channels into a single multi-access virtual interface. So that's now documented pro and con of point-to-point versus multi-access in that section. Next slide. Then basically this whole description of, how do we do ACP on layer 2 switches, and that's one of the reasons actually why we selected Grasp instead of MDNS. That's in its own normative section, because one of the key points is also we want to say that layer 2 switches need to run ACP, otherwise we can't do auto configuration autonomic services on layer 2 switches. So that's elevated to its own type of additional normative section, right? Why do we want it and how do we do it? And that's really that we run Grasp on each layer 2 port of a device, and the primary devices actually are not necessarily pure layer 2 switches, but the typical mixed layer 2, layer 3 devices that should do it on a per layer 2 port. Yes, I mentioned the ACP Connect, that was done better. And then basically the section of how do I tunnel across non-autonomic places, I modified that into two sections. So the standard one is tunneled, right? So you basically build the whatever tunnel manually, and then you run the ACP across it, just Grasp discovery, everything fine, but you end up with 2 layers of encapsulation, whatever your configured tunnel is, and then the secure channel. So that's not really ideal. So I added a section to say you just configure a remote endpoint for your secure channel association, like, okay, here is your remote IQ2 peer, please talk with him and build your IPsec connection. So that's a lot more efficient. Security side, so through the review with Grasp, we got a lot into those details. So I added a subsection against attacks from the inside. Everything else in before was, of course, about the wonderful property of the ACP that it very nicely protects everything against attacks from the outside. But what happens if a device is compromised? So I basically added that section, and that was also one of the outcomes why the ACP now has one inconsistency with what we finalized in Grasp, which is that basically we're now saying in the ACP that the transport substrate for Grasp really, even inside the ACP Grasp unicast, should rely on TLS, even though there is an outer IPsec, and that's really about mitigating attacks from the inside by nodes that have been ACP nodes that have been attacked.
Okay, so then all this stuff that was initially upfront, so basically the domain certificate provisioning enrollment, that's a section that was discussing Brewski and the stuff that has been moved down because it's really just informative as far as it comes to the ACP. The whole discussions about why not LDP, MDNS, and ultimately why dull grass. So that was just moved down, just the text, verbally somewhat improved. That what I mentioned, the extending ACP channel negotiation via GRASP, something which we never finalized, is now in that informative section. And then all the way at the end, some, restatement, resummarization of how about these domains, subdomains, and certificate authorities, how does it come together? Because these pieces were kind of scattered in the normative text necessarily because they go through multiple steps like the certificate and the addressing. So that's basically why I thought restating this for people to read up is very helpful. Next slide. Right, so as far as domain certificate is concerned, so I was trying for clarity, for modularity, to make Brewski not mandatory by the ACP, but make it optional and saying the really prerequisite, and we had that in the text, is you got to have this magic certificate in the devices that basically has the ACP information. However you create that, we don't really care as far as ACP is concerned. Sure, we want to recommend Brewski, but you could use netconf zero touch, or you could manually type the bits in with peek and poke, right? So as far as ACP is concerned, it doesn't matter. But then, of course, comes the point, okay, if you don't do Brewski, how do you do certificate renewal? We want to do certificate renewal. So that's actually the section. So now in the ACP document, the maintenance section is basically about renewal. You must run EST. You must have in the ACP an EST server or more. These can be discovered by GRASP. So there is also the GRASP objective to discover the EST objectives. And oh, by the way, Brewski is just an extension to EST for the first bootstrap stuff. And one of the reasons to explicitly write out EST in the ACP is also that when we started writing ACP, our understanding was that Brewski was the all-inclusive document about everything that the certificates needs. And, the more I was participating in the design team, the more it became clear that Brewski really only cares about the initial bootstrap, not about renewal or everything else. That's part of EST. We want to refer to that, and that's basically what the document now does. As far as obviously one and a half, ANI, autonomic network infrastructure devices, they must support Brewski and ACP, but of course you can just build a device that only has ACP but not Brewski. So that's basically the clarification, I think, the structural improvements that's now in the text with all the details needed. Next slide.
A couple of questions. So you actually means EST is mandatory reference, but it's not a mandatory procedure in ACP.
No,
right?
EST is mandatory procedure. Brewski is not mandatory procedure. Brewski is an extension, a superset of EST. Brewski adds the initial bootstrap, how you initially get a certificate. And even in that initial getting of the certificate, it does rely on EST. Okay. Right? And when you do renewal, you don't need anything from Brewski. You really only need EST. And so because we're saying, okay, the prerequisite that's been in there since day one is you have the magic certificate. The assumption was, of course, you get it from Brewski. But what do you do afterwards for renewal? And for renewal, EST is sufficient. That was totally unclear. So this is now completely clear that, as soon as the ACP is able to start up, because it has a certificate, what happens from there on with the certificate is EST. And of course, also things like a certificate revocation list and so on. So nothing that would, require Brewski. Michael?
I think this is great. And in particular, you could, as you said, you could type them in. You actually could use netconf to get them.
Exactly.
Okay, there's a bunch of other ways of doing that. And I think that it's entirely appropriate that the certificate lifetime considerations be within the ACP document, because it is the ACP document that actually makes use of them. Yeah. Just as I haven't read this part of the text. I think it's very new from this week even, right?
Today, 8 a.m. Actually, it's tomorrow. I typed in the date wrong, so this document.
Yeah, so you're talking about a document that we need time travel to have read.
Yes.
It's
but
online now.
but
Already,
yeah, it's online. Yeah.
the-
Okay.
the
So
time is
anyway,
tomorrow.
so this sounds great. It's surprising, but it's wow. You've been busy this week, so that's great. But I wanted to say that for instance, one of the considerations in IETF that we had long conversations about was, for instance, are you allowed to build an IETF essay whose lifetime exceeds the certificate lifetime?
Yeah.
Right. And one of the conclusion was, the answer was yes, because at the time you created the essay, the certificate was valid,
Right.
and it'll probably be renewed. But but revoking it won't kill the essay anyway.
Yeah, but that's
Okay.
actually the one piece where
Right.
I hope I did add a sentence, and I think we should basically, for the ACP, say, if there is revocation, the stuff is revoked, please kill ACP connections.
Right. So
Yeah.
so that's exactly why I'm saying that this has to be there. But in this case, we actually need to think about. We need to say, okay, well, that's a consideration, and that also that you need to make sure that you renew your certificate sufficiently in advance that.
Yeah, 50% is what I wrote down before.
Right,
That was my personal
But it's not
experience.
just 50% for you.
Yeah.
Because if some other part dies because it didn't do this, then you may get cut off,
right,
and not be able to renew and have to go through some bootstrap again, right? Because some other parts of the network were not as observant. So it's not just for yourself that you need to keep things up, but for the fact that other devices need to renew.
Yeah.
So I'll read this document, this part, and it sounds great, and I think that this is really progressing. So that's wonderful.
The other important detail about the renewal is, so now I put the stake in the ground of saying, okay, you must support CRL or CDP to get a CRL over HTTPS, just for the generic case that you have the I don't know what bootstrap and what no certificates. And then in the informative section about Brewski, I put the
You want
summary.
a certificate distribution point, CDP? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
we can
You
discuss
put
it.
it,
Let me
you-
just
and we
finish-
can argue about whether
Yeah,
that or
exactly.
OSPF.
But let me just finish that. Basically, the preferred model, of course, is to use Brewski. That's in the informative section. That's also where it explains this wonderful model of the short-lived certificates, and the fact that we can even do the equivalent of renewal with Brewski after short-lived certificate has expired, the stuff that we kind of worked out in the Bootstrap team, because we can, instead of doing renewal, we're doing just re-enrollment through the Brewski infrastructure, right? So that obviously is the preferred solution.
It's not obvious to me. Once you have the ACP, I think OCSP would be the preferred solution, and
Okay,
long-lived
we
certificates.
can have the discussion, right?
Yeah.
I think it's longer because I'm very worried about these, things that are, offline for a long time. And I don't want to have denial of service attack by disconnecting the OCSP server. But okay. Next slide.
One last comment. I welcome those kind of good changes, but make sure you also have those correspondent change in the reference model document.
There is actually no change in the intention, what we're doing here at all. It's just, where is stuff written up, right? And I think that all the certificate management, that was just, I think us as ACP authors, we initially expected Brewski's taking care of everything, but obviously Brewski is only up to the first time when you get a certificate. So it's really our responsibility, and we just haven't catched up to it. But reference-wise, there is nothing new.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Right, so these are the details in terms of the ACP thing. How do you find your closest EST server, and if basically that trust point is in the cert? So there's a bunch of detail. Out of time, recommendation to the renewal after less than 50% of lifetime has expired. So please read the text and beat up on it. Next slide. Okay, what was this? Right, so this was basically a bunch of the details that has led me in terms of there was kind of suggestive text where
I couldn't understand at all how it would implement it about subdomains and how to recognize subdomains, and basically way too many references to intent will solve the world. And I'm getting concerned that, we may not get intent anytime soon. So I wanted to try to figure out what's the most easy thing we can do about subdomains. And, for example, especially when we use Michael's V8 addressing space, we don't have the zones. We can use different ULAs. So basically, next slide. So this is now the format of this wonderful ACP information. So we have the ACP address, we have the domain. Now there is a routing subdomain field, which is optional. And so the whole idea is the hash you calculate of the concatenation of the routing subdomain and the domain, right? Domain is example.com. Routing subdomain would be area51.research. So the actual string from which you generate the hash is area51research.example.com. So now you can create basically different ULAs. And also by using multiple subdomains, if you have an ACP connection to appear in a different subdomain, you can start doing intelligent tricks and future stuff like grasp negotiating. What are you doing on the routing side differently? Right now, it's purely in this standard the ability to create different ULAs there. You can use that to create multiple disconnected networks that you can connect whenever you need to, but it's really just a stake in the ground to hopefully do in follow-up work very easily more changes and improvement in routing and aggregation, other things without having to wait for intent. I think that would be high level a way to summarize this for the time being. Next slide. Yeah, and this is also, there was this other text that was saying, okay, if you want to basically start, bringing together different domains into the ACP, you cross-sign the certificates. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, how much effort does that take to get from existing certificates over certificates that are cross-signed? And so basically I changed that over to, you just want to distribute the other networks CA as another trust anchor that basically in your certificate check you're accepting. So that's the much easier solution. Next slide. Yeah, so I talked about that. So the whole ACP neighbor discovery, that was all just moved down and refined in the text to be hopefully easier readable. I'm gonna keep forward part, yeah. Next slide. Yeah, so I talked about the, I don't have the actual format, but we had these 13 bits of routing subdomains that we reserved and didn't use, and then we only got 16 bits for different devices from a registrar. So Michael was proposing an optimized addressing scheme. So now the document has both of these addressing schemes in there. So going forward, we can experiment with both of them. We still have 5 more code points available. So I think that should be perfectly valid at this point in time to have these 2 options.
You haven't said this the next sentence, so I can't comment. Won't comment on it. Did you?
I don't know. You're running up there, and now I don't know what my next sentence would have been.
Well, we reworked talked about the profile.
Oh, the profile. Yes.
Says this is a template document. You
Right.
copy and paste it into your document.
So I was going through that, for 2 hours with Pascal, and yes, we did copy exactly
Then
that
you're
section
done.
forward.
The template is never to be published.
Huh?
The template that you're talking about.
So, I mean, okay, I was just trying to put a sentence in there that said the format of the following, profile definition is based on the template foobar document, and then basically XML to RFC bailed on me because it was a dead reference.
Don't just copy it into your document. Yeah.
Come on, you've done 9 revision. Get it posted as an RFC.
No, it's not. It's not publishable. It's not. It's a template, right? It says TBD,
That's
TBD,
crazy.
TBD, right?
Okay.
That's what this,
Well,
people are
those are
supposed
crazy
to copy
process.
and paste
Okay.
it and make their
This
document.
sounds like crazy process for beers. So let's, okay. Fine.
Okay, so that's why it's not published,
Okay.
and that's why every
All right.
6 months I sometimes put a new one in.
Okay.
But
Let's
no,
not waste
it's
time
a
here on the
template.
working group because I would love to pontificate over that. Okay.
Okay.
Right, so then the key part, which I also laid out in more detail, is exactly the discussion that we had in Chicago, also about the fact that Ripple, ultimately, to have all the flexibility of its feature, would need to have things in the forwarding plane. And I was afraid to raise the bar in networks like, you know, typical service provider enterprise networks that never had these forwarding plane requirements, which is also why in the Cisco implementation we didn't do this. And so ultimately, the profile that we have right now doesn't require any forwarding changes. Ripple is just establishing a destination prefix-based routing table, like, you know, any other lame routing protocol, and it quickly converges and updates these as you expect from any other routing protocol. So what it now gives you is there is only shortest path route to a single NOC. Right? If you have a second NOC, the path to that NOC might not be ideal. It's like you have a spanning tree network, and, you know, one NOC sits at the root and the others are sitting on other places in the network. I think that's perfectly fine. If people figure out that's not good enough, yes, then we can go back and create another profile that adds all the IP and IP encapsulation, the RPI header, and this forwarding plane stuff. But I think now at least it's very clear what we're doing, that it works, and how we could expand it. Next slide. So GRASP in the ACP, right? So I think I initially mentioned that already. Transport security substrate, mandate TLS 1.2 for GRASP unicast, you know, attack vector from the inside, and effectively we've moved the Spanish Inquisition about TLS parameters from GRASP over into ACP, and I'm happy to take that on and see that we have all the details. Eric was giving me a bunch of references. I'm not sure that I've gotten through all the details, but hopefully we got SHA 256 and bit size and so these things. So we'll see that during security review. Next slide. So yeah, all the layer 2 stuff, I don't think need to go into more details on that. Yeah. Next slide. Right, so everything was appendices. There, when we had the discussion, there was kind of nobody reads beyond the author's names. So that's why what we had in appendices before is this section, further consideration, just directly before IANA considerations. And so what do we have in there now? I think we already went to that. So the whole kind of discussion about Brewski, Ripple unchanged, the TLS stuff. Yeah, so we talked about all this already. Thanks. Next slide. Yep. Normative, informative. Next slide. Right. Right. So as far as the security properties, right? So the whole idea that we have encrypted channels, right? Because we've seen, you know, in implementation history, a lot of people always pushing back. Who needs security, right? We're just in a secure data center and other places. So just wanted to kind of be a lot more clear about these two main reasons why we do it. One is really all these bad existing protocols, whether it's DHCP, DNS, radios, NTP, all this stuff that you do in network management that isn't self-protecting, and the you know, ability to protect against packets being injected into the management plane and forwarded through that, but also pointing out that obviously any new stuff being built inside the ACP should or must use end-to-end encryption. You have the certificates from the ACP. Don't rely on the secure channels alone. Yeah, I think that's the key part. Next slide. Right, okay, so that's where we are. As I said, hopefully we can finish this up now very soon. Shepard review, and then working group last call, and well, that's it. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
So with my working group chair hat on, I have to compliment both you and Michael Richardson, because when I sent out the call for agenda, none of you guys replied to me how long time you needed, and each of you actually used 25 minutes for the time. Now we're half an hour behind the agenda.
Sorry.
All right, you guys are, you know, contributor for the working group milestones. That's why you get priority. Okay, but please inform how much time you need next time. If you ask, I'll give you the time you need, but you didn't ask. Okay, then I will try. Yep. I will try to be very quick for this. This is the validation use case for the, validate those autonomic network infrastructure. Next page, please. If a prefix manager is a little more address space, it discover peers by grasp discovery message, then negotiate with a discovery peer for the related address space, use grasp messages. Next page, please. This is a change from 03 to 04 draft. We actually added more explanation about the solution and make it more readable. And we added the IPv4 options. We actually removed the DHCP PD flag. However, we do add some text say this mechanism could working together with DHCP PD. Also, it's claimed in the document that this document is not a complete function specific, so that not all details are included. This is just a informational document. The main purpose is to describe the architecture framework, utilize the components of autonomic network infrastructure. Next page, please. This just a reminder for what's the scenario we try to solve, and that's in the IPRAN network. We try to assign the autonomically assign the prefix according to the rules in this IPRAN network. Next page, please. I'll go through that. Next page. This is what we added for the IPv4 extension. We proposed the edge prefix objective options. There are two options. The prefix manager objective could be extended to support IPv4 by adding an extra flag. Or the option 2 are separate, but similar objective could be defined for IPv4. So that's something still, the working group may need a little bit more discuss, but I guess I'll take that to the mailing list, not to discuss here.
Yeah, just I think it's good to give an idea, how to do it with v4, because ultimately v4 is so crooked that you would, I think. It makes a lot sense to, v4 is in much more need of all this automation than v6, but I'm not sure that in an informational document we need to figure out all the details, right? So I think the whole idea of this document was as a validation and give an idea on how you do it, but then if people really want to start implementing something, I think we can do follow-up work that specifies everything to the details.
Sure. Thanks. Next page, please. We did remove PD flag. We actually proposed the edge prefix objective options instead. Within that, there's no PD support sub option anymore because it's unnecessary to use PD to allocate prefix when we already negotiate our prefix. Next page, please. We also did add the analysis about the relationship between the grasp-based prefix management and the DHCP PD in the section 4.3. Next page, please. We add the abstract deployment overview for clarification. Some deployments are in the appendix, not in the Mendex, including the address and the prefix management with DHCP v6. It describes the DHCP deployment module without a central DHCP server and with a central DHCP server. It also adds the prefix management with the GRASP proposed deployment module using the GRASP. So that's more scenarios descriptions here and to describe how to deploy them. Next page, please. That's all for now. And the status?
What was it? I have to in the next week wanted to do the Shepard review summary and post that. So
yeah, I believe we actually need another. We in principle we passed the working group article, but we probably want another minor update probably by next week.
Okay.
Then you can do that.
Yeah, but if it's only about this IPv4 stuff, which is what I got from Brian, I think that's benign. I don't think we need to do another last caller. So I think we can just.
I believe so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any question? Okay. So next, is that you? You.
Yeah. Well, I'll just sit here and make it fast. I got hit by my co-chair. So. Okay, next slide. Right. So yeah. So this is just through the Sheng did a great detailed Shepard review. So many small textual changes. More detail into what stable connectivity means, also meaning that it's meant to support managing IPv4, even though it by itself only does IPv6. And then we find the challenges and limitations section that was, I think, most confusing to read for Sheng, and trying to emphasize on the fact that from my experience, the biggest remaining challenge for IPv6 is really bad IPv6 support in NMS systems in the NOC, like, configuration servers, even SDN controllers, other type of service that you need to provision the network. And so having worked with customers, they really said, okay, in an enterprise, right, where, a lot of the software often is a lot older and they don't want to buy new licenses. And that's, why there is this crazy section of doing V4 to V6 NAT as a workaround for these customers. And I think it's so ugly that nobody who really don't need it temporarily would, ever want to deploy it longer term. And that's also why I don't see it as a risk.
Are you familiar with data center SIT?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so some of these options we reviewed, and kind of last year we're looking into what was actually possible for that customer, and that didn't work for one reason or the other. Mm-hmm.
So data center SIT, which is stateless IP ICMP translation, it may be the wrong direction. But generally, it depends whether the devices that you are trying to connect, which are V4 only, are clients or servers. And I'm not sure which side you're more concerned about.
I just wanted to give one example of a stupid way to get the old V4 NOC stuff working, and that's the stuff that in a lab I tested out and make working on routers, so I know it works. And I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but I think I wanted to show that you can adopt the stuff now, even when you're faced with this legacy NOC equipment. That was basically it.
Okay.
I don't like it any more than you, right? So yeah, and then also the description of when do you use the data plane, when to use the ACP to talk between NOC devices and device in the network. And Sheng was concerned about why am I mentioning DNS. In my experience, is just in a NOC, everything that you manage is managed through names for the devices, and whether they have local host table or use DNS, it doesn't matter one way or the other. And the idea of using ACP for management is trying to say that if you have names that distinguish whether you use the data plane or the ACP or even both, because they are bound to one, both, or the other address. That's the easiest way to get support for the ACP added underneath existing NOC equipment, right? Then you just have the foobar underscore ACP device, and that's exactly, you know, the name that you use when you go through the ACP. And I was just doing the example with the DNS, and that's basically it. So this is the stuff that through this work I've gotten interested to work on as a follow-up for this. The first one, and that's what I've been talking about with Brian, is really a standards track thing to define all the graph objectives of all these servers in the NOC, whether it's radius, diameter, TFTP server, DNS server, DHCP, and then basically specify how devices in the network auto-configure their client to use these servers, because that's exactly the magic stuff that happens today in networks through a bunch of these magic initial configs, and then whenever one of these servers fails, and you get one with a different IP address, and people haven't considered that upfront, they have 1,000 devices they need to change. So that would be an actual, you know, standards track outcome that could follow up from that. And then architecturally, you know, we've done the stable connectivity for stable enough to do management operations across it. But one of the things we've started to learn is that in the SDN environment, people are also starting to build out really very closed loop systems through out-of-band management channels. For example, in data centers, there are IGPs where instead of doing hop-by-hop negotiation, you use the out-of-band management network to actually, you know, flood your LSAs, collect information about links up and down. And, you know, it would be cool to figure out what would we need to do in an ACP performance and recovery-wise to, you know, allow to do that through an ACP in-band. And telemetry streaming, of course, also is a performance thing. So those would be kind of the next things that I'd love to see. But again, yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
So,
So this is Jefferson Nobre, and I mean, this is just a short presentation on the change from the 03 to 04 of the reference model. So I'm thinking it's just a couple of minutes. So at first, that there is some change in the wording in some places of the draft. For example, we have before work in progress and now AN phase 1. And other things like that, some, for example, out of scope for ANIMA and not part of phase 1. So there is this new concept of talking about phases of ANIMA and not of out of scope in this reference model version. Besides that, there are some explanation about the concepts behind this phase on the AN. Finally, there is some updated reference, some editorial stuff by Michael, and that kind of thing. Next slide. I think that the biggest change in the draft is the security consideration sessions, and this is almost a new session in the work. The title had changed and other things. So, for example, there are a couple of comments that are taken into account to change the text and to improve the concepts that are described in the draft. The session, the first subsection of the section changed its name. Has had its name changed from threat analysis to consequences of a distributed system, because there are lots of security issues that appeared in that subsection that are general security issues that can occur in a distributed system and not some specific issues on the ANI. After that, there are also some threats on the ACP that are pointed on the new text. Next slide. Something that it was also changed is that there is some information about the messages that are liable to be exposed to third parties on any unprotected layer 2 link, and this is in the previous version of the draft. It's something like a general statement, and now it's pointed out that it's specific to some messages which are described in the section 2.5.2 in the GRASP draft, and also especially in the fluid messages to perform discovery tasks. Next slide. So the current state of the document, it's for the editor is that the document is practically done. So we are asking for the working group last call to the chairs.
Thanks, Jeffrey. It is in my plan to do the Shepherd review after this week. Then after I give out my comments, I probably will ask update for that. Then afterwards, we could do working last call. Okay. Thanks for saving the time. Brian? Do you still want to talk about this? Brian? Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so next slide. I think the most important thing we need to cover is the first one, purpose of this draft. So that will be the discussion at the end, I think. The draft is intended to provide some consistent definitions of several GRASP objectives, which we need in the infrastructure. That's its purpose. It's not intended to do the jobs of the infrastructure documents. So there's a working group choice, which is whether to publish this as a separate document or to simply put the material in the main drafts that they belong to, which are Brusky, ACP, and stable connectivity. So I would suggest we discuss that point at the end with Michael's question earlier. Just a quick look at the objectives that we've proposed here. For Brusky, there are two objectives, one for the join registrar and one for the proxy. The objective for the join registrar is used by a proxy that wants to discover a registrar. So it can do a standard GRASP discovery process and then obtain details from the registrar about what options it provides for connection by doing standard GRASP synchronization. And the other one is the join proxy objective, which a proxy uses to announce itself to all the pledges. And that's restricted to the linked local instance of GRASP, also known as DUL. So the proxy effectively joins the registrar to the pledge, and that's why you notice the proxy is the principal node mentioned in both of those descriptions. So next slide, please. So this is just an example of the join registrar objective. I don't think I'll go into the syntax details, but it looks, this is sort of Python-esque notation. There's the join proxy, also Python-esque notation. What I would say is that at least writing in an object-oriented language, it's extremely easy to define these things and also extremely easy to play with the definition, find out if it does what you want, change it if you don't like it. So although I think the actual code of something like Brusky will almost certainly be written in C, for experimenting with the model in which we build Brusky as a GRASP user, a high-level language is a great way to do it. And pretty much anybody with 5 minutes study of the basics of Python can understand what this is all about. And I guess it will work in several other languages as well. So I don't want to go into details. The next one, please. The ACP, it's similar. The ACP announces itself to nodes which are potentially joining the ACP. So each node in the ACP can announce itself to link local neighbors. And this is designed exactly like the join proxy objective, so that in fact an optimized node could send both the same flood message. In other words, the piece of code that's going to act both as the join proxy and as the ACP could send out a single flood message by which the pledges and the future ACP nodes, which are the same things, of course, can get the information they need in order to join. So next slide. That's an example of, yeah, sure.
Comment on that? Yeah, no, I mentioned that so I read that from ANI objective and wrote that also as an option to the ACP draft when I copied it, but also noted that if I'm having a separate ACP ASA from Brewski proxy ASA, then obviously it would be probably more work trying to coordinate that than just sending two messages. And I think Michael was thinking about a different, low-end implementation where everything is in a single ASA. So I think those are the dependencies.
And that's why they're separate objectives, but they're so similar that you could probably write a common code base that could handle both of them if that's what you wanted to do. And the last one in the document is actually a little bit speculative. It's one for the stable connectivity draft, but as I think Turles has just illustrated, there are quite a lot of open questions about how the stable connectivity mechanism would actually use GRASP. So I would regard this objective at the moment as a placeholder rather than as a firm definition. I think that Turles wants to comment on that. But I would comment that if you define a GRASP objective as a negotiation objective, it turns out that you can use it as a two-way communication channel because the negotiate messages go backwards and forwards, and each one contains a new version of the value of the objective. That's how negotiation works. So it's very easy to turn that into a general purpose messaging protocol if you want to do so. In fact, I wrote a messaging system using GRASP a few weeks ago just for fun. It took about an hour. So that's what this objective would be, very general purpose in that same sense. Okay, so can we go to the next slide?
Maybe just as a comment, right? So the negotiation capabilities of GRASP, I'd love to explore. For this negotiation of ACP secure channel with different preferences, kind of trying to emulate IQV2 and seeing how we can bring other objectives like performance in there. I think that would be a great exercise. As far as learning about NOC services, right, I mentioned in the stable connectivity that I'd rather see a lot of separate services like, a DHCP server, DNS, all these different servers as individual objectives being announced. I haven't figured out how I would use a, coalesced ANOC objective through which something would be negotiated. But if you have, any further idea on how this, could be leveraged to do something, I'd be happy
we can
to hear
work
about
on that. Now that GRASP is out of the way, I have a bit more free time. So let's go to the next steps. So clearly for the individual objectives, we need to review and agree on the details, and that's work to be done on the list. But the decision for the working group is whether you want those details in the respective drafts or whether you want to adopt this document as a standalone document. I'm sort of developing an opinion, but I'd rather hear if other people have opinions. And that's the end of the slides, basically.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for putting effort into this. Sorry, Terry Manderson,
I can
area
see a very
director.
small image of you.
Responsible area director.
Thanks.
Oh, fantastic. As someone who reads an awful lot of drafts and reviews an awful lot of drafts every 2 weeks for the ballot process and approval of documents, going out to yet another document for information is always a pain. If it's germane to a particular topic, I personally would prefer to see it in the document in either a section or an appendix for very easy reference, rather than going to hunt down something else. That's my personal opinion. I'd also like to note that the IESG are slowly moving towards a position of not publishing problem statement style documents or documents that are use case documents. So keep that in mind. I know this doesn't quite fit in either of those camps, but food for thought.
Michael Richardson. So I thought this was a useful document to have in the working group so that we could easily and quickly compare the style, grammar, if you like, of the different objectives that people had, and that the print was to copy and paste them from other documents into this document, and that allows people to kind of get a flavor of things. And then conversely, when someone is saying, okay, I'm trying to write a new objective, and they go to this and it collects a whole bunch of them together, and they can go, oh, okay, I see how it's being used, so that's great. I don't think it should be canonical or normative, I guess is the right word, and I don't think it should be published, but I think we should maintain it until the end of the working group, and then we're done. But
is that a similar kind of status for your template stuff? Is that a working group document or?
Yeah, the template was a working group document. Okay. And you know what else? It had a security director review for that document, the template you're speaking of, because they were going to see the documents, the instances.
No. I mean, you've already persuaded me,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
Especially the fact that I couldn't reference it doesn't mean that I can kind of, try to outsource my text, which is what Terry didn't want, but I have to copy it over in my document.
Yeah.
So, okay, interesting. Makes sense.
And so this is what ANI objectives, I think, just remains within our working group, and is for us to kind of figure it out, and future people writing new things can easily find, a list of them without having to dig through a lot of documents. But I don't think it has any value to publish as an RFC.
Yeah. No, I'd love to ask the question to the mailing list also with a proposal then, not to use it as a reference. You must copy the text in your document of the objective that you depend on, but we're collecting all the objectives in a consistent fashion in this document for reference, for cross-reference.
Yep, that's fine. And maybe we need a wiki page in the long run or something like that. But I think it makes sense, but you should certainly ask the working group.
Next.
Next.
Oh, that's right. That's us.
So, this is something I think important, but I originally signed myself 35 minutes, but now I will try to finish it in 50 minutes. Next page, please. Brief history, we have the RFC 75, and RFC 7576 was done in MRG. It gives us the autonomic networking definition and the design goals. So that's still there. That's still the, what we mean for autonomic networking and what we are working on towards full autonomic, maybe in 5-10 years times. So those two RFCs are still important. We identify gaps by that time. We fill some of those gaps. We're still working on the rest, which maybe means another 80% of it. So next page, please. Oh, get back. We had the current charter right down in August 2014. By that time, we actually go through 24th version of proposed charter text. So all those charter texts actually has their meanings, every word, but some of them may be, out of date. That's why when we do the charter, we need to update some text. Next page, please. Here are the important message from the current charter. We don't want to boil the ocean. That's why the current charter is quite restricted to the milestone we set up from the very beginning. We only add one milestone work item for last 3 years. That's voucher. And we would like to improve the progressive instruction of autonomic functions. And we want to work on only the reusable components, and we want the autonomic network infrastructure to be reusable. So keep that in mind. And the working group is focused on the professionally managed network. That's by the word. It could include in the IoT network as well. But definitely the home network, which probably managed by the users, subscribers themselves, is out of scope. That will remain. Next page, please. Yeah, for the autonomic networking, we define reference to the self-managing characters of distributed network element. But we are not really, against some function to be centralized. The autonomic functions should be able to adapt into unpredictable changes, so that will be flexible. And the closed loop control is important. We don't want to have some open APIs which we don't know, how to close the REST procedure. If the REST procedure after we invoke APIs lead, further input from human being, that's when we cannot call it autonomic. But we actually could define the APIs which trigger out some autonomic procedure afterwards. Okay, next page, please. Yeah, this is the 6 components we list in our current charter. We actually touch at least 5 of them. Those black fonts actually goes well. We touched a little bit the common way to identify the node, but we are not do very well to identify the nodes in the topology of the network, or found, express itself to be more understanding by the other elements of the network. So we maybe could keep working on that. And for the last components, a consistent autonomic management module. We did, work on that a little, but my personal opinion is, still a lot of work to be done for that. Maybe we already done 15 or 20% of that work for the full autonomic control, but a lot of still left. Next page, please. This is what we have done so far for the ANIMA autonomic network infrastructure. We have 3 reusable components. We have the bootstrap key infrastructure. We have the autonomic control plane. We have the generic autonomic signal protocol, which is used by other 2 components as well. And all those together to become the autonomic network infrastructure. And beyond them, we have the autonomic service agent, which we think could be considered as applications within the network devices. So by meaning of application, it actually means it should be easy to introduce, and it could be updated easily in the network to meet specific purpose. The ASA interact with each other to fulfill the specific management task. So for the current charter, we haven't opened to do those ASAs. We just have 2 validation use cases, which actually in informational status. But hopefully in the future we would be more open on ASAs. But we're still working on the criteria of which ASAs could be accepted for standardization. It's not all of the ASAs should be standardized. Next page, please. Yeah, this is the working group milestone again. This all those pages we have 4 milestone working group documents. It should be definitely finished by the next meeting. Next page. And those 3, hopefully we think we could send them to IESD before the next IETF meeting, but maybe still some work, for the updating or the address the comments from IESG. By saying those, that means actually we almost complete our current milestones by next IETF meeting. That's why we need to discuss rechartering. Next page, please. The procedure today, just relax. We are not going to discuss any rechartering procedure or new charter text or milestone until we reach agreement with our ADs. So today we just review the list of possible works items. Actually, for the last 2.5 years, every IETF meeting, we had 2 sessions for ANIMA. Most of the time in the second session is open for the long chartered work items. So that's why we already have a very good foundation for our recharter. However, we also had some criteria of voting per work item. Terence, would you want to go through that?
Yeah, so I mean, always a reminder, right, that we're in the IETF here, not the IRTF, where we, I think, also have done and hopefully still doing good things on the autonomic side. But when we're trying to figure out, what should be the next charter items, I think we've seen over the last 3 years, especially on the Thursday, Friday sessions, a lot of cool ideas. But when we want to take on things for a charter and, the reminder 24 revisions that we had to get through the first round of the charter, and that's really always coming down to a bunch of points that I wanted to remind folks. Right, we need active contributors to the work, right? So if you propose something, it's best when you can contribute it to yourself. Then does it actually solve customer problems that you're aware of, right? Will the resulting document be necessary and sufficient for interoperable implementations? I think that's always for the IETF the most important things. We love in the IETF protocols that interoperate instead of only things that could be done proprietarily. Does it leverage charter round 1 work, right? So the ANI was meant to be reused. So anything that actually reuses it is a cool thing for us to also validate what we have done and to prove it's useful. Can it proliferate the work into more deployments? Now, I guess not necessarily all of that needs to happen here, right? All the related work happening in 6TiSCH is cool as well. So this may not be a good criteria for our working group alone. That could also happen in other groups. Then is it necessary and helpful to improve deployment of charter round 1 work? And when we discussed a little bit about additional grasp details and a bunch of the other things that we have in following slides, I think through the work on the charter items, I think we learned a bunch more details, extension, other things that would really be helpful to make that happen. And yeah, ultimately, global warming, right? Don't boil the ocean. And also consider, is this something that ANIMA should be doing as opposed to other working groups?
Okay, thanks, Terence. Next page, please. Yeah, here are some potential works we already collected through the last 2.5 years, and some of them we already has draft, maybe expired, but could be reposted. Some new work we think is valuable. I actually put them into 3 categories. First, leverage the current autonomic network infrastructure. We had the ESA guidance, which explains how ESA should use the AI, and GRASP API, to provide the APIs for the ESA to invoke easily, and AI deployment document could help, to understand how deploy in various environment, and it may feedback some requirements or modification to our AIs. And infrastructure information distribution over a GRASP actually extends the GRASP ability a little bit. Also, the open source reference implementation for AI may report back to the working group. I'm not sure that part, the last point could become working group document to be published as RFC or not, but that will always be welcome to giving the working group a report.
Yeah, I mean, if people doing practical work like to also have a presence in the IETF, then typically the documents that we've seen in the past are, implementation and or deployment experience documents that are derived from that work, obviously not the work itself.
Yeah, thank you. Next page, please. The second category is beyond the current AI. We maybe have, extend the AI to be wider, that including the intent module. We already have, long discussing on that, but still up to now, it's not very clear how it works. But maybe we could, working on that in the new chapter as well. And the AI extensions adding more ability to the AI, topology discovery, and the domain management. Up to now, we assume there's only one single autonomic network domains, but that may not be the case. We may need to combine, merge multiple domain together or separate the domain, and the autonomic network over the virtual devices. And the reporting functions for autonomic network may be abstract way. Also, the controller integrating at the data mode for that. Next page, please. And ESA relevant. We had several contributing draft for the ESA correlation and function resolution. That's one of the potential work. Generic ESA specification, if some ESA is generic enough, to be wide use for every autonomic devices, that's something definitely good and should be standardized. The specific ESAs based on the specific scenarios for which we are not decided yet. If we can work out, good criteria to, decide whether they should be standardized or not, then we may be working on some of those specific ESAs. Otherwise, we did provide very convenient way for those specific ESA to be registered their objectives in ICANN. So that still means those specific ESAs could be able to interpret to each other.
Maybe just terminology-wise, I think one of the things we missed in this slide, I think when it's about how do we build software, that's how when we think about ASAs as software modules, right?
Yeah.
If we're thinking about some particular service, our terminology is the autonomic function, right? That's basically something that's done by a bunch of ASAs together, and so we don't have that term. But if it's about what we do, that would be, do we want to work on this autonomic function or not?
Yeah. Okay. In last minutes, we also have the network slicing in reference module and ASAs. I was in the slicing both on Monday. One of the work item mentioned, but I don't think the OPS AD understand is the autonomic requirements for the slicing management. For that, maybe until the management of slicing has become some possible, then beyond that we could add the autonomic functions to over it for the network slicing management. And the ASA for load balance based on the device negotiation. That could be some generic ASAs which apply to every autonomic node. And auto software update management. Again, another fundamental function for ASA. Also towards PubSub and storage integrating, we have one presentation today. And the left management, left time management of ASA was discussed before. Next page, please. We also have several drafts submitted to ANIMA during the last 2.5 years, but nobody really present or asked the working group time slot for that. We may, if there are contributors, we may recheck that. Next page, please. Okay, this is the last page. The next, after discuss with our AD and get permission from AD to recharter. Okay, AD.
It doesn't quite happen in that order.
Okay.
I want to hear the discussion first about what the working group thinks it wants to work on, and then we can take those ideas and dilute them, concentrate them, whatever you want to do, to bring together a concise set, and then consider the benefits of doing a recharter based on that.
Okay.
So I'm really interested now in seeing how many people turn up to the line behind the microphone and express their opinions, and then also seeing that repeated on the mailing list. And that will be indicative of where ANIMA could go and how much interest there is and how much, how many people there are to contribute to that effort. Thank you.
Michael?
Michael Richardson again. So I liked your slide about the 7 or so items that we were 2 in red and 5 in black. And that was our things we had accomplished and things that we hadn't quite gotten to.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good, actually. I think we should pat ourselves on the back there.
Sure.
And I wasn't entirely sure that we haven't done the red things, although I realize there's no actual document about how to address nodes or how to name them. But it seems like we could fit that in somewhere with a little bit of work and finish those things off. I don't think it's that hard, but maybe I missed the complexity somewhere. We have done a really good job of not boiling the oceans by never speaking the words intent unless it's in a quiet little,
Okay.
Kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's really good. I don't know how SUPA's doing. I think they've kicked intent out of their working group. I know that I tried to pay attention at one point, and my eyes glazed over because there was too much abstractions for me. So maybe that's we actually need to have a cross working group event, whether it's a physical meeting where we invite each other or something, but I actually think that we could discuss a lot new items. We have no implementation experience with ACP to date. I think we'll get it very soon. And once we have that and people can actually do things and build ACPs usefully, then I think that a bunch of the other stuff will suddenly become like people have to play with it first. And then they'll go like, oh, okay, now I need a specification on how to whatever, right?
Right.
And so I actually think that the right answer may be that we should finish our work and plan to be quiet for a couple of IETFs, but not actually disband. That's what I would like to see us do.
Cut off line after Jefferson, but be quicker.
So, I mean, I would like to stick on pragmatic things for the things that I've seen as gaps that we didn't manage to finish in the work items, right? For example, for the actual standards follow up for the stable connectivity, Yang model for
Alex, I said cut off line.
For managing the network, the grasp objectives. So a couple of things around that, which I think would very much help actual implementations of the ANI. So I think there's a bunch of good things to do. As far as the intent is concerned, I think it would be good to keep that discussion going. I like the draft very much. I kind of started to talk to the ADs a little bit, and my impression is that the best thing we can probably do about intent is come up with a different name, because I think what we've been thinking about really is more like a northbound network-wide interface to provision services and policy. And whenever we've been asking people what do they think is intent, we've got different opinions, right? So I think that's.
Can we save the discussion regarding to intent to the main list?
Sure.
We have
I'm just saying high level on these areas.
I really want to give some time to those three presentations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Alex, I said cut off line after Jefferson. So.
Yeah, I would like to add my voice, the fact that this work has to continue. Let's don't forget that autonomic networking started 45 years ago with the first paper on sync, and it's supposed to continue. It's not something which you do it once and finish, because this will be a disaster. And I would like to suggest that maybe part of the work in the next period of ANIMA to be concentrated on the emerging professional networks which are appearing, namely the software networks. If you like it or not, this is going to be a trend. Now, it's related to the autonomic networking of virtual systems, obviously slices, but also with all the other tools which are needed to integrate to the rest. Therefore, this, in my view, it should be at least a high priority for this working group, rather than to just add more, or in addition to adding more elements to the existing thing. All the concepts so far are applicable to non-virtual elements. It's a time to move to that element, this ecosystem, which is happening. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, you have 6 minutes.
Morning, everyone. This draft just mentioned by Sean, it belongs to the category of leverage the current ANI. Okay, next, please. So the problem is when we want to utilize the current ANI into some existing traditional systems such as network manual server. And there are some gaps. The first one is because in the ACP, all the addresses are generated automatically. And in the traditional way, the addresses are mostly planned very restrictly by the administrators. So even if the central management server can connect to the autonomic nodes, the server cannot figure out which one is which. The second question is the autonomic node itself also doesn't know who is the server. And the third one is the management server also don't know the topology of the autonomic network. So because of these gaps, it will be impossible for the traditional system to utilize the ANI. Next, please. Okay, here are some very initial ideas of how to solve these problems. To the issue one, we need a naming mechanism, just as mentioned by Michael Richardson. And I will explain it a little bit in the next slide. And the second one is we simply need a discovery mechanism for the management server or controller. For the topology discovery, we need a mechanism to report the topology information to the server. Okay, next please. Okay, for the naming, we proposed a conceptual technique called a structure name. And the essential thing is the naming elements. That's some key information or hints of a device name. And some of the elements are mandatory for a device name and some of them are optional. And we can also have additional detailed information to describe each naming element. So for a real name, it just composed of several or even more naming elements, just as the example showed. So we also need to define the semantics and the pattern of a name. So the semantics could be included but not limited to the device type, the ownership, location, role, functions, etc. And the pattern, just as showed the example, we can compose the name by location, device type, functional role, and a distinguishing number to make sure the name won't be conflict with each other. And the domain of the device. Okay, next, please. So how we can compose that kind of structure name autonomically? And in general, there are several approaches. The first one is some information just can be generated by the device itself. For example, the device type and some attributes of the hardware system. And the distinction number simply a pseudo number, sorry, I just forgot the English word. Some word generated by the device itself that can distinguish with each other. And we can also allow some specific hardware interface to, for example, we can, the hardware, we use some USB key to input such kind of information. And and the network interface as well. Next, please. So for the server discover, we can simply define some grasp objective. This is just some strawman definition for your reference. And we can also use MDNS. And topology for local topology, ALDP is always a useful tool. And what we need to define a grasp objective to report the topology to the centralized server. Okay, next. So the draft is at the very initial stage. We just want to give some ideas and to see whether this direction worth to be explored in as a future work item in this working group. Okay, the next one.
Thanks. The next one still you, but again 6 minutes.
Okay. This is talk about utilize the current A9 into IoT network scenarios. Next, please. As you can see in the picture, it is actually from a real commercial product. And it is about the smart electric meter. And all these meters, they organized as a network and connect to the gateway. So we can have multiple gateways, and each gateway normally only attached with one network. And the meter nodes are usually very resource constrained. For example, one typical mode, it only has 128 kilobyte RAM and 512 kilobyte ROM. And the gateway is much more resource rich. And these small nodes only need to connect to the gateway. And normally it doesn't need to directly connect beyond the gateway to the server. And in this real production, they use repo. And they also utilize the IPv6 addressing. Okay, that's the scenario. And it is only an example of the targeted scenarios. And these nodes can be lights, smart lights, or maybe a water meter or something else. Next, please. Okay, and these commands are actually already implemented into the product, and it's only communicated between the gateway and the nodes. And we categorize the management content into 3 categories. One is the node status inquiry or report, and some of the instructions are bidirectional, both from the gateway to node or vice versa. For example, the heartbeat instructions from the gateway to the node. And when the node left the network, it will report the status to the gateway, etc. And the second category is the operational commands, and is sent by the gateway to indicate the nodes to do a specific action. For example, you just leave the network, or the whole network just dismissed. And the last one is the configuration for some network parameters. And one observation of these instructions is that it's very different from the traditional management. It's more like autonomic signaling rather than the traditional netconf or SNMP based configurations. Next, please. So there are also some existing solutions and their specification. The first one is the COMI, the Managed Interface developed based on CoAP. It is there are several drafts under the core network, core working group. And in a nutshell, this solution is just a LT version of netconf YARN model. And the other one is called lightweight machine-to-machine. It's developed in another SDO called OMA. And the management protocol is also based on CoAP, but they don't choose the YARN data model. They define their ourselves OMA objects, and the OMA objects is in a flat organization rather than the YARN tree style organization. Okay, next please. So given we already have existing solution, why we consider use GRASP for this scenario? Because the GRASP itself has provided enough capability to support the functions. The minimal requirement is just we utilize the request message and the synchronization message plus the flood message can fulfill the current requirements. And the GRASP is very lightweight, and the code space is really small. And actually, there's a team is now developing the GRASP prototype for the product, and they established the code space should be within 3K. But of course, it's for the minimal requirement, not the whole GRASP.
30 seconds.
Okay. And it's extensible and reusable. The bottom line is the current either CORMI or lightweight M2M, they occupy too much code space and not acceptable for such kind of little nodes. So there's some potential work. We might want a specific version of GRASP. For example, the running on UDP and the other technical details we don't have time to discuss today. Yeah, just some hints. Please read draft, and any question, please send email.
Thank you, Ben.
Hi. Next slide, please. So we triggered some discussion on the mailing list about, rethinking how we actually distribute messages in the ANIMA infrastructure, so in ANI. So why is that? Because as you know, the reference model and also some drafts are actually already mentioning that, so as a possible rechartering item. So information distribution might be necessary, for example, for the unliked intents, but also for some other things. If, for example, several others need to somehow communicate together to establish some service, for example, it would be probably a good idea to provide some kind of information distribution which is more structured than what we have today, which essentially boils down to flooding the whole network. Next slide, please. So we have several whys. I will not go into all details of that, but as a guiding example, we can think about a bunch of sensors in the room that need to agree on some network-wide value. So this value is not local to a sensor. Let's say temperature. The physicist will tell you, the temperature is not what the one node is reading, but rather some kind of average value of all nodes. So if this is an average which needs to be established by consensus, essentially you would need not only to distribute, let's say, an intent, whatever, switch off the AC when the temperature is 23 degrees Celsius, but rather you would do something like, okay, I am measuring 22, but what do I know what the temperature is? So you would need to probably flood and reflood and reflood until you actually get the consensus, okay? So this is also true for some other possible scenarios, which I will not go into all details to. Next slide, please. So point is that if you look at the current 4.7 section in the reference model draft, it's kind of confusing the information distribution requirement in the sense that I want to reach all nodes, or I want to reach all nodes of that type, with the specific realization of that being unconstrained broadcast, so essentially flooding over the network. Actually, GRASP, which is then used over the API, is using some kind of multicast. But as we know, that most of networks do not really support multicast in that way, and network-level multicast repeatedly failed. In principle, probably there are better methods to do this, maybe on the application layer. Next slide, please. And as one of these methods has emerged in the literature, essentially is this PubSub, this publication subscription service, right, which is an implementation of an application layer multicast, where essentially the subscribers and the publishers are decoupled, and that allows you for some kind of asynchronous method of communication, which then, however, achieves almost all properties of the more synchronous flooding, especially for bigger scales. Specifically, the problem is that in the ACP, if you read it currently, for example, the intent distribution is by definition going to the whole AD, so the autonomous domain, because this is how the autonomous domain is defined. The scale of that is not constrained. The sparsity of the network is not clear, so that would lead with this flooding and repetitive flooding essentially to message explosions, we believe. So that's why something like that, something more structured, provided from the ANI or maybe some kind of special ASA would be probably a good thing. So the PubSub in the realization, however, very often relies on storage. Why that? Usually, at least for the repetitive, resending, or for this so-called backlog, so for error handling and so on. But it's really profitable to use some storage. Okay, next slide, please. So then essentially the idea becomes very simple. We could introduce a closed loop support for storage in Anima. That would be general support. So Sheng insisted on that before. So this is not some kind of function that is only, helpful for somebody, because you can see the calls would be something like put and get of some information objects, data objects, let's say. And that would work more or less the same work like the routing works today. So if I want to route today, I do not actually have necessarily the route to the end node. What I do is I ask, some next hop to actually deliver the message. So the same would or could work for the storage. And there are known proposals for that. Essentially, you do not know where to store it, but you would very simply give it to the next hop, and the next hop would find it, and so on and so on. It can be structured, okay? So that would work in a way where we will just start from some state, and then do a specific deterministic procedure and end up storing this data somewhere. Okay, more or less the same like you do with routing. Okay, next slide, please. So it can be implemented then in different ways. We can see it as some kind of non-mandatory additional ASA. I mean, the ACP itself is an ASA, but probably the lower level of ASA, so that is probably the second point. But it could be some kind of mandatory, say, user level ASA. Mandatory or not mandatory could be decided, but would be probably quite easy to integrate in the current structure of the documents, drafts, RFCs, and so on. It's less standard costly, let's say. Okay. Probably, or maybe it would be less interoperable. So that's why we could also consider that as a basic service of ANI and introduce that kind of ASA at the same level as ACP, or maybe integrated within the new version of ACP or something like that. So both can be considered. Next slide, please. And then just for an overview, essentially, we kind of try to match, the different use cases that we mentioned at the beginning. You can look at the slides that are available to the actual, usefulness of the mechanism, either it's a general storage or specifically the PubSub. Thanks a lot.
Perfect timing. Sorry, we don't have time to take any question or discussion. We are 2 minutes overdue for the working group. Thanks. So we do encourage you guys for this new work to invoke discussing in mailing list. Also, the chairs will try to invoke some discussion towards the charter stuff. Thank you all. This is done for this IETF anima session. Thank you.